would believe that when we die, it's not the end, that you lift out of your body and into another life, another world. Yet the evidence is there that this is true, not least by witnessing spirits talking from the other side. You want an example of such talk? Then what about this? Rupert Brooke died in 1915, but in 1957 he described the afterlife using his own voice. It sounds incredible, and it is. Here's a sample of what he said. I came over during the First World War. It was all very sudden, excepting I found myself in a body which no longer seemed to be the same. In appearance it was the same. I just couldn't realise that I'd died. The body seemed foreign to me, didn't feel it had any weight. When you've been used to a body with weight and substance, to find yourself in one with no weight, no substance, seemed most strange. This terrible lightness about myself puzzled me very much at first. If I touched myself, I was solid, yet if I pinched myself, I didn't feel it. It worried me terribly. One of the first things I did, once I became conscious that I was no longer on your side, yet had a body identical in appearance, I thought, well, am I, or am I not alive? Brooke was famous, along with Wilfred Owen, Siegfried Sassoon and others, as one of the First World War poets. The Soldier is his most famous poem. This recording of it comes from someone called the Farnham Town Crier.
If I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is for ever England, and there shall be in that rich earth a richer dust concealed, the dust whom England bore, shaped, made aware, gave once her flowers to love, her ways to roam, a body of England breathing English air, washed by the rivers and blessed by sons of home. And think this heart all evil shed away, a pulse in the eternal mind no less, give somewhere back the thoughts by England given, her sights and sounds, dreams happy as her day, and laughter learnt of friends, and gentleness in hearts at peace under an English heaven.
If you think Rupert Brooke was killed in one of the great European battles, the Somme or Verdun or Ypres, you'd be mistaken. He caught septicemia from a mosquito bite and died aboard this French hospital ship, moored in Trabucchi Bay in Skyros, a Greek Aegean island. Now, let me introduce this English author, James McQuitty. The Rupert Brooke extract I just read to you comes from his book, 50 Famous Spirits of the Past Speak, available on Amazon. These 2 pages list all the spirits whose messages feature in the book. So many renowned names you might want to halt this video to examine them all more closely. McQuitty researched many sources for his book, including the direct voice seances of the medium Leslie Flint. His spirit voices come mysteriously out of the air, not through Leslie Flint's own voice box, but from somewhere above the medium's shoulder. You can find the Flint website here, which contains many original recordings of such people. McQuitty's book is a prime source, and some of his contributors include John Ellis, a former British executioner, Queen Victoria, former elevated judges such as Lord Burkitt and Lord Birkenhead, as well as Mahatma Gandhi and Winston Churchill. But for this video, I can only feature a couple of spirits for illustrative purposes. So let's return to Rupert Brooke's afterlife experiences, which I've edited for brevity. I remember sitting beside this river, he said, not a little frightened as a matter of fact, wondering what the next step was going to be, when all of a sudden I was conscious of someone standing beside me, yet I could see no one. And then a voice said 3 times, "Come with me, close your eyes." And I thought, nothing ventured, I can't do much else, so I just closed my eyes. The next thing I knew, I was in an entirely different place, a vast building, not unlike a concert hall. There were many seats and people gathered there. I was sitting and could hear beautiful music, simply wonderful. It seemed to vibrate and carry me beyond time and space, giving me a wonderful feeling and much more calm. And I began to perceive in the far distance an enormous panorama of changing light, all kinds of colours constantly changing, from the palest shades into deep hues, and gradually the whole building seemed suffused with this. It was like some vast auditorium, an Albert Hall, only much vaster and more beautiful. McQuitty's entire report on Rupert Brooke is well worth reading, not just this sample. And when I was looking up information on Brooke, I found a short YouTube cartoon by the Freedom from Religion Foundation in the United States based on one of Brooke's poems. They argue that their cartoon, and I quote, exposes the irrationality of heavenly hopes by framing wishful thinking about an afterlife from the point of view of a fish. They argue that Brooke's perspective denies heaven or an afterlife. They gave me permission to use an extract from it.
Fish say they have their stream and pond, but is there anything beyond? This life cannot be all, they swear, for how unpleasant if it were. One may not doubt that somehow good shall come of water and of mud, and sure the reverent eye must see a purpose in liquidity. We darkly know, by faith we cry, the future is not wholly dry. Mud unto mud, death eddies near, not here the appointed end, not here.
So what would the Freedom from Religion Foundation make of Rupert Brooke, apparently reporting from the other side with his own voice, if there is no afterlife? Also, did you notice that in the poem The Soldier, Brooke refers to the eternal mind, an idea incompatible with the Foundation's beliefs? For me, this organisation has thrown the baby out with the bathwater, since whether or not there is a greater reality need not involve religion at all, while there's ample evidence for the actual existence of it. Here's more from Brooke's communication, in which he discusses the ancient Greek style of clothing he preferred and the conditions attaching to what can be worn. He says, "The point is, there are certain colours you couldn't possibly wear unless your very nature and soul made it possible, because we're often known for our temperament and character by the colouring of our apparel. We know each other by the very illumination around us. For example, if you hadn't progressed very far, you wouldn't be able to wear very soft clear blue because it wouldn't be in your makeup and nature. You wouldn't have made it possible to have that colour in your auric emanation, and in consequence you wouldn't wear it in your apparel. You wouldn't be attracted to it because you weren't ready for it. Somehow, automatically almost, you're what you are. Whereas on Earth a man may build up a facade, giving the wrong impression, suggesting that he's an awfully nice person, when actually underneath he may be ghastly, that sort of thing you can't do here. Here there's no deceit of any kind. It's one of the first things you realise, as a matter of fact, and it's quite a shock. Here you are known for what you are." Well, now let's turn to another spirit voice in McQuitty's book. Elizabeth Fry was married, a mother of 11 children. She was a Quaker, renowned as a philanthropist and an English prison reformer, and a major driving force behind improving the lot of prisoners, especially female inmates. Her campaigning brought about the 1823 Jails Act, which brought about the segregation of men from women in prison, with female warders to protect women from sexual exploitation. Her diaries were explicit about the need to protect female prisoners, and such is her stature that in modern times her image has been celebrated on the British £5 note. In this extract from a Leslie Flint seance, she discusses the afterlife environment from her perspective. "I don't think there's a solitary thing in this life that is not just," she reports. "Everything falls into a condition of natural law and order. You're perhaps shown the path and advised, but no one's forced to do anything. A person changes gradually. They don't suddenly become people of great wisdom or spiritual attainment just by being on this side. Even the worst criminal gradually evolves into a better person. It may take some time, but time is infinitesimal to us because we're in eternity and there is no time here. There can be a consciousness of time in the lower spheres, but it's purely a reflection of the material world. Parts of life we did not know existed gradually come within conscious range as new vistas strike the horizon. As we approach them, they become more clear, and you see a different picture. That is why souls from different spheres depict life rather differently." The 50 spirits reported in McQuitty's book sometimes speak at length. The longest contribution comes from Frédéric Chopin, the Polish pianist and composer. His 3 messages amount to 15 pages, recorded at Flint seances in March and November 1956, and again in December 1959. And by no means do the speakers in this book talk exclusively about the nature of the afterlife or the lessons they learn once there. Their comments are very varied. These may not be evidential in themselves, which might even lead us to question their reliability. Indeed, there have been some cases of spirits from lower spheres impersonating well-known people through the Ouija board. Changing emphasis, here are 2 well-known books containing interesting afterlife descriptions received through automatic writing rather than Leslie Flint's mediumship. In the first case, the Irish medium Geraldine Cummins channeled material from one of the founders of London's Society for Psychical Research. Frederick Myers died in Rome in 1901, a man best known for his book Human Personality and Its Survival of Bodily Death. Using Cummins' mediumship, Myers wrote from the other side, The Road to Immortality, which describes the afterlife spheres as he understood them. According to him, Stage 1 is the Earth dimension itself. Stage 2, the intermediate realm or Hades, where memories of our entire past lives flash before us, and whether this experience is a hellish one depends upon each individual's memories. Stage 3 is what Myers calls the realm of illusion. Some call it the Summerland, where people may stay for a long time in Earth terms, before advancing to Stage 4, that Myers calls the realm of colour, an indescribably lovely existence where souls discover much wider freedom of function and scientific, religion and philosophical dogmas become redundant. Stage 5, Myers calls the realm of flame, in which the soul acquires a new body, enabling it to tour the stellar universe unharmed by temperature or turbulence. Stage 6, he says, is the realm of light, allowing souls to live without form, existing as white light, and thus fulfilling the final purpose of their evolution of consciousness. Stage 7 is reputed to be what's called the realm of timelessness, a dimension for those of advanced spiritual nature that no vocabulary can actually adequately describe. Although this is interesting, there's no external evidence to support its assertions, even though it garners the attention of readers. So let's look at an approach called stylometry. This is based on an author's tendency to write in relatively consistent, recognizable, and unique ways. Each person has their own unique vocabulary, sometimes rich, sometimes limited. Some people use short sentences, while others use long ones with many clauses. And no 2 people use semicolons and punctuation in exactly the same way. This is where linguistics meets computer science, with artificial intelligence software able to do in minutes what humans would take much longer to analyse. It can identify authors by their writing characteristics, as well as dealing with the authorship of pictures, music, composition, and even the moves made in chess games to determine who the players were. In the case of Frederick Myers, it could compare the style of his writing while he was alive with the contents of his post-mortem book, The Road to Immortality. Did Myers write it from the other side, or was Geraldine Cummins the author, or was somebody else responsible? Interesting as this question is, Myers' work has yet to be investigated using stylometry, but the potential is there, and it could happen soon. According to psychical researcher Chris Carter, the author of this book, some experts have already noticed that Myers' post-mortem communications through different mediums are not consistently the same style. Another afterlife classic is Life in the World Unseen. It was channeled by Anthony Borgia on behalf of Monsignor Hugh Benson, who died in 1914. His afterlife descriptions differ in style from Myers, but are attractive for providing engaging descriptions despite not being evidential in themselves. But evidential cases of spirit communication do exist. Take this man, James Chaffin. Although he had 4 sons, the will he wrote in 1905 left everything to just one of them, Marshall. However, in 1919, Chaffin wrote a new will dividing his property equally among them. This he hid in his father's old Bible, telling nobody about it. So it was not found when he died in 1921, with the result that Marshall inherited everything according to the 1905 will. Later, in 1925, Chaffin's apparition appeared to his son James, telling him that his will had been carried out incorrectly, and he indicated that he'd left a note sewn into his old coat. This note subsequently led to finding the updated will hidden in the Bible. Some folk suspected James had forged this will, but 10 witnesses confirmed it was definitely in his father's handwriting. Once found, it was uncontested and superseded the old one. The authorities in North Carolina declared it legitimate, and the will received probate and was carried out. So here was a case supporting the theory of survival after death, depending upon spirits talking, sufficiently evidential for the Society for Psychical Research in London to publish this case in 1927. With most descriptions of the spirit world, the nearest we can come to accepting their validity is through corroboration. That is to say, they're coming from different afterlife reports, from different places at different times, and by different spirits. But how can this consensus be established? Let's turn to some really recent research from the University of Padua's Science of Consciousness Research Group, published by Dr Tresoldi and his colleagues. In September 2024, they issued an updated version of their paper, Living in the Afterlife, Clues from Direct Experiencers. The novel aspect of this study is that it employs 3 different artificial intelligence software products: ChatGPT version 4, Gemini Advanced, and Claude 3.5 Sonnet Opus. These tools were given the task of analysing and describing such consensus as they could find among 11 books containing afterlife descriptions. 7 mental mediums were also chosen to connect with deceased people in the afterlife. They were each given a list of questions for their spirit contacts to answer, a task they completed, with the replies being analysed by the AI software. If you're already familiar with psychical research literature, you may find that the results of this study are not exactly astonishing. The AI packages analysed the replies from both the medium's reports and the content from the 11 books by different authors. Let's take the books first. There were half a dozen areas which provided good consensus. Having digested these books very rapidly, ChatGPT concluded, "The afterlife is described as a multi-tiered reality, where souls progress through different planes or realms based on their spiritual growth and consciousness. These levels range from the lower, denser planes, where souls experience more earthly or negative experiences, to higher, more ethereal realms characterized by light, love, and spiritual advancement." Gemini Advanced reported, "The afterlife is not depicted as a single uniform destination, but as a multi-layered reality with various realms or dimensions. These differ in vibrational frequencies, levels of consciousness, and the types of experiences they offer. Souls progress through these realms based on their spiritual development and choices." Meanwhile, the Claude Sonnet software concluded, "While the exact number and nature of these realms differ among accounts, there's broad agreement that the afterlife consists of multiple levels and spheres of existence. These are often described as corresponding to different levels of spiritual development or vibrational frequencies." This study describes 5 more afterlife issues: the role of mental components in shaping the afterlife reality, the continuity of each individual's identity after death, personal learning and growth on the other side, communication among entities, as well as descriptions of afterlife landscapes and environment. Meanwhile, the information provided by the mental mediums, using exactly the same questions as used for the books, provided these results. Here's an example regarding the influence of mentality on shaping the afterlife reality. ChatGPT says, "Reality is a projection of consciousness where each soul creates its environment based on its inner state and spiritual evolution." Gemini Advanced states, "The afterlife is described as a realm where thoughts and emotions have a profound impact on one's experiences and surroundings. Positive thoughts and emotions create harmonious and beautiful environments, while negative states manifest as challenging or unpleasant experiences." And Claude reports, "The afterlife is described as a thought-responsive environment where consciousness shapes reality." These artificial intelligence findings also indicate which areas provide the best consensus. They include individual consciousness continuing after physical death, and that free from the limitations of our physical bodies and brains, spirits can move freely, experience heightened perceptions, and engage in activities impossible in physical life. Also, without the need to protect and feed the physical body, spirits can spend time between leisure, learning, and navigating social and natural environments, allowing travelling mentally and meeting and communicating with other beings, animals included. What I found strange was the failure of these AI tools to emphasize that life on the other side also involves providing service to others as a way of advancing to higher spheres. If you'd like to see this groundbreaking report for yourself, here is the link. It contains more detail than I can possibly summarize in a short video, and I commend the researchers for their novel approach to this subject, not least since they acknowledge that further research is needed with different participants and different sources of information to be able to come to broader generalizations using their techniques. For me, the question also arises as to whether such high-speed AI analysis provides any better conclusions than good old-fashioned human scholarship. Which brings me to this book, The Realities of Heaven, by Miles Edward Allen, published in 2015. It provides just such an example of thorough investigation. Like McQuitty, Allen collected communications from 50 spirits, which in this case were found in 58 different books. Allen's approach was to extract quotations from different spirits to see how far these agree with each other. Through this chopping up process, extracting quotations from here and there, Allen ended up with an enormous 900 statements on a multitude of afterlife aspects, all of which are contained in his book. It represents years of effort. You can find these quotations under different headings, and he provides a further 273 citations that you can read if you have the source books available to you. That his categories contain spirit reports disagreeing with each other is not surprising. Take, for example, where the afterlife realms are located. One spirit on page 87 of Robert Hare's book, Experimental Investigations of the Spirit Manifestations, reported the spirit world lies between 60 and 120 miles from the terrestrial surface. In A Witness from Beyond by Ruth Taylor, a spirit reports on page 204, I live in your exact space, but at a different vibratory speed. Arthur Findlay reports on page 120 of his On the Edge of the Etheric, encircling your world are planes of different density, and these move in rotation with the rotation of the Earth. But this is disputed in Matthew, Tell Me About Heaven by Suzanne Ward. On page 95 to 98, it claims, we do not rotate as the planets do. We're more in suspension than in orbit. And only by reading his book can you appreciate the variety of spirit opinions, although elsewhere we're warned these cannot always be trusted. On page 47 of Edward Randall's Frontiers of the Afterlife, we are assured that, quote, some spirits who have not progressed far enough to see and realise the beauty about them, when communicating with their friends on Earth, give quite wrong and dissimilar impressions of conditions over here. And since none of the statements are veridical in themselves, you're left to make up your own assessment as to their worth. The headings under which Miles Edward Allen presents his book include Arriving in the Afterlife, the nature of the spirit body, the hierarchy of planes and realms, the structure of the Summerland and of the Shadowlands, the methods of communicating, and even on page 112, sex after death. The author says of this, yes, while there may not be a Santa Claus, there really is sex after death, although spirits tend to be circumspect or downright enigmatic about the details of intimate unions in Summerland. He provides 15 quotations from his source material, and here are a few of them. According to Frederick Myers in his Beyond Human Personality, quote, in this sphere, women do not bear children, though the illusion of sensual passion may be experienced as long as it's the soul's desire. In Stuart Edward White's Across the Unknown, we're told that, quote, the beauty of physical mating is not lost but intensively increased in the spiritual realm. While Elsa Barker's Letter from the Afterlife claims, there does seem to be a good deal of mating and rejoining of former mates. This sex distinction is as real here as on Earth, though of course the expression of it is not exactly the same. And James Pike's The Other Side agrees. Yes, there is sex, but not like on Earth. It's not physical, of course. It's more obviously like what sex really means. Here, you actually can enter the whole person. It's like you are in fact merging and becoming one. Suzanne Ward's Matthew, Tell Me About Heaven also reports, what we experience that could be compared with your loving sexual unions is a spiritual and etheric bonding with total fusion of energies and shared knowledge of selves. While Ruth Montgomery's A World Beyond begs to differ. Here, there is no sex, since there are no sexes, but we are able to meld with those we love to such an extent that the union is far more perfect than in physical form. And finally, let me add that more than one author points out that for reasons not manifest, some information about the spirit realms appears to be forbidden from being passed to earthlings. Also, the afterlife, in Summerland for instance, is often claimed to be so marvellous and different in many respects that human vocabulary is simply inadequate to convey accurately what needs to be said. So, in summary, what can we understand of this subject? The author of Realities of Heaven acknowledges that his is not the only book tackling this topic. He recommends, as I do, the following two books. Both offer an intelligent survey of the field, being shorter and in a different style from Allen's own title. The Afterlife Unveiled by Stafford Beatty, seen here, is 119 pages and was first published in 2011, while The Afterlife Revealed, What Happens After We Die by Michael Tim, also published in 2011 with 190 pages. Although I'll try to summarise what they say, you understand it's difficult to do so in just a few hundred words. But here goes. In the first stages of arriving on the other side, the spirit body appears as solid as our earth bodies, and there's a recognisably familiar natural world containing flowers, trees, open spaces, mountains, rivers and buildings. Once here, folk often revert in appearance to what they feel was their best younger age on earth, with physical disabilities disappearing once they've adjusted to an afterlife existence. Indulging in religious ritual does not amount to being spiritual, although many continue their earthly religions until they drop such observances in due course. The mind has enormous power in the afterlife, able to influence the kind of environment folk find themselves in. Given that like attracts like here, people are brought together who share similar interests and beliefs. But remember also that there are different levels of vibration or spheres, together with spirit reports disagreeing about exactly how many of these there are, varying from 7 to 21, to include the Shadowlands, Earthbound areas, Summerland, and celestial spheres. Most reasonably decent people live on the third level, often called Summerland, with the opportunity to advance higher, while huge numbers who pursued greedy, immoral and material lives on Earth begin lower down. And permeating everything everywhere are the so-called natural laws which operate automatically. The beauty on level 3 is said to be unimaginably magnificent, and as spirits advance to higher vibrations, these environments become even more so. There are many opportunities for work serving others and for continuing education. Folk with lower vibrations cannot mix freely with those in higher spheres and remain in the darker lower spheres, while consistently cruel folk are left alone or mix with others similar to themselves. At some time, spirits go through at least one life review. Nobody stands in judgment. Spirits are said to judge themselves, having to re-experience the effects of their thoughts, words and actions during their physical lifetimes. They discover that everyone is responsible for their omissions on the earth plane and that you reap what you sow, which is the universal law of cause and effect. But there's still a point to make, and I'm helped to do this by referring to this book, The Supreme Adventure, Analysis of Psychic Communications by Robert Brooke. It brings into focus the value we can place on spirit communication related to how refined a messenger on the other side has become. Brooke asserts, and others agree with him, that spirits in higher spheres have to lower their vibrations in order to communicate with the earth sphere, and in the process their consciousness becomes compressed, depressing their memories and making it more difficult to convey accurately what they intend to say. As a result, these communicators may have to rely on those lower down in order to pass on their messages, which, coming through mediums, may lead to distortions in their messages. I'm not suggesting that what we read from those in the afterlife is bound to be inaccurate. If it interests you, then go ahead and read it for its enriching experience. Only you can decide if what you learn can be trusted. And finally, let me recommend this video hosted by Dr. Craig Hogan, President of the Afterlife Education Institute, who also runs a website called Seeking Reality Online. Entitled 5 People in the Afterlife Describe the Afterlife World, It includes some colourful descriptions in the verbatim style of James Quitty's book. I'm impressed by Craig Hogan's enthusiastic presentation skills, but since he's omitted the lower spheres from these descriptions, in which a vast population is said to exist less happily, it ends up being overall more optimistic and beautiful than my own understanding of things. But for all that, it's well worth visiting, so here's the link. Thanks for listening.